means for you. Here's what you should expect. If you've ever applied for a credit card, a student loan, a mortgage, you know the feeling of signing your name to pages of barely understandable fine print. It's a big step for most families, and one that's often filled with unnecessary confusion and apprehension. As a result, many Americans are simply duped into hidden fees and loans they just can't afford by companies who know exactly what they're doing. Those days will soon end. From now on, every American will be empowered with the clear and concise information you need to make financial decisions that are best for you. This bill will crack down on abusive practices and unscrupulous mortgage lenders. It'll reinforce the new credit card law we passed, banning unfair rate hikes, and ensure that folks aren't unwittingly caught by overdraft fees when they sign up for a checking account. It will give students who take out college loans clear information and make sure lenders don't cheat the system. And it will ensure that every American receives a free credit score if they are denied a loan or insurance because of that score. All told, this reform puts in place the strongest consumer financial protections in history, and it creates a new consumer watchdog to enforce those protections. Because of this reform, the American people will never again be asked to foot the bill for Wall Street's mistakes. There will be no more taxpayer-funded bailouts, period. If a large financial institution should ever fail, this reform gives us the ability to wind it down without endangering the broader economy. And there will be new rules to end the perception that any firm is too big to fail, so that we don't have another Lehman Brothers or AIG. Because of reform, the kind of complex backroom deals that helped trigger this financial crisis will finally be brought into the light of day. And from now on, shareholders and other executives can know that shareholders will have greater say on the pay of CEOs, so that they can reward success instead of failure, and help change the perverse incentives that encourage so much reckless risk-taking in the past. In short, Wall Street reform will bring greater security to folks on Main Street, to families who are looking to buy their first home or send their kids to college, to taxpayers who shouldn't have to pay for somebody else's mistakes or irresponsibility, to small businesses, community banks, and credit unions who play by the rules, to shareholders and investors who want to see their companies grow and thrive. Now, already, the Republican leader in the House has called for repeal of this reform. I would suggest that America can't afford to go backwards, and I think that's how most Americans feel as well. We can't afford another financial crisis, just as we're digging out from the last one. Now, I said when I took office, we can't simply rebuild this economy on the same pile of sand, on maxed out credit cards, houses used like ATM machines, or over-leveraged firms on Wall Street. We need to rebuild on a firmer, stronger foundation for economic growth. That's why we invested in renewable energy that's currently creating new jobs all across America. That's why we're reforming our education system so that our workers can compete in the global economy. That's why we passed health reform that will lower costs for families and businesses. And that's why I'm about to sign Wall Street reform into law, to protect consumers and lay the foundation for a stronger and safer financial system, one that is innovative, creative, competitive, and far less prone to panic and collapse. Along with the steps we're taking to spur innovation, encourage hiring, and rein in our deficits, this is how we're ultimately going to build an economy that is stronger and more prosperous than it was before, and one that provides opportunity for all Americans. Thanks very much.
So are you encouraged that the oil has stopped flowing in the Gulf?
I think it is a positive sign. We're still in the testing phase. I'll have more to say about it tomorrow.
The president offering his characterization of the financial reform bill, saying too big to fail has been ended, and suggesting that the taxpayer will never again in the history of the country be forced to fund any sort of a financial system bailout. He did not address the aspect of the use of taxpayer money and on an ongoing basis, and the misrepresenting of the accounting of the value of all the assets by the bank, basically accounting fraud that has been authorized by the president's Treasury Department, so that the banks can misrepresent the value of the assets and then export the capital out of our country as they draw it off the taxpayer. But if you want to get a loan, the paperwork will be easier and shorter. Mark, what were you thinking as you heard the president?
I tell you, Dylan, this is a classic illustration of why so many people in this country no longer believe anything that they hear from anybody in Washington in an official position. Here's what's changed with this bill. Before this bill, Wall Street had to go to Congress to get an $800 billion bailout. After this bill, they get the bailout. They just don't have to go to Congress and have a vote on whether or not
Wasn't that Rahm Emanuel's whole point? I mean, didn't Rahm Emanuel go to a meeting with Democratic leadership and say, you idiots, pass this bill and then we'll be able to bail out the banks without ever having to have the ugly mess of that big vote where you actually have to legislate and be held accountable for what you do. This way we can just give the money to the bankers and not have to vote on it.
Exactly. The insiders took care of each other on this bill, and that's what happened.
Jonathan Capehart, 4 out of 5 Americans, according to this most recent Bloomberg poll, don't believe this bill solves the problem. Obviously, there are some good things in the bill. You can pick out pieces obviously consumer financial protection being the most obvious. How do the Democrats convince an American population where 4 out of the 5 respondents agree more or less with what Mark just said, one way or the other, that they're working for them come November?
I think they're going to have to do with FinReg what they did and are still trying to do with healthcare reform, and that is, now that it's passed, explain to the American people what's in it and how it's good for them. And, you know, the president just said to us and the American people that there would never be any taxpayer bailouts ever again. Mark just said that that's not the case.
No, Mark just said they'll do it in the back door through the Federal Reserve, so you never have to do it in public again, which is Rahm Emanuel's point, and Rahm's a former banker. The point is, listen, we're going to need to fund this scam, but we can't be doing it in front of everybody. They'll yell at us.
Exactly. It institutionalizes, it institutionalizes too big to fail, and it makes the taxpayers on the hook from now on without the formality of a vote.
Ken Strickland reported on Andrea Mitchell earlier today. I believe it was Senator Dodd who said on the Senate floor that, you know, it's great that this is being passed, but we're not going to know how well this will work until we hit the next financial crisis. Let's just hope that we don't. Let's just hope that we don't get there.
Well, no. But the thing is, we're acting like I got a break. But if you have a system that is corrupt, it will ultimately corrupt itself until you break up the. I'd say it's not even worth it. Not for you. I'm running out of time. You're worth it. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Mark.